ASIS&T. My name is Abubakar Orisa, and I've always said that this is the greatest honor one as an ASIS member receives. I serve as the president of this great association with members from over 75 countries around the globe. I'm sure some of you are from those countries, so welcome. If today's attendance the room is almost full, and the buzz around the hotel are anything to go by, this is one of the best annual meetings of ASIS&T. It's really exciting to see all of you here in this room and in London. Because of our record attendance, some of the rooms for the sessions could be standing room only. So you need to get there early if you want to get a seat. But please go to as many sessions as you can, because we have really, really great content at those sessions. And also, based on your feedback throughout the last few years, we continue to make changes to the structure of the annual meeting, including changes like ending the annual meeting after the closing plenary on Tuesday, so that some of you can get back home, right? Or do some shopping or sightseeing. I've heard that London offers lots of sightseeing opportunities, and shopping if you love shopping. So we also continue to provide lunch. You asked for it, so you wanted more meals, and we're gonna feed you, so I'm sure you are happy about that. The awards banquet was changed to a luncheon, and very well attended over the last year, so I hope you will plan to join us on Tuesday to honor our deserving award recipients, many of whom are here, and congratulations. We're going to congratulate you on Monday again. The business meeting will be on Tuesday. In the morning, again, we're going to feed you. There will be breakfast, okay? Now you see I love food, so that's why I say we feed you, so yep. We also have coffee breaks each day with light snacks and beverages. And the hotel staff are excellent. I have to really give them, I have to say kudos to them. The service is wonderful. And the president's reception and the welcome reception is at 5:45 p.m. tonight in Chabli's room. There will also be a person session held there tomorrow at the president's reception. Again, the same time, 5:45 p.m. I believe it is in this room, right? It will be in this room. If you have not downloaded the app, that's the best way to go to those sessions and find your meeting rooms and all that. So planning and hosting such a conference as great as this takes a lot of effort and leadership. That's why I need to thank several people and institutions. First, I would like to recognize and thank meeting sponsors who make this meeting really, really great. MDPI, Rutgers University, Simmons University, University of Arizona, University of British Columbia, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, University of Kentucky, and Wiley, and also our exhibitors. They are, if you have time, please visit their tables. Cambridge University Press, Emerald Publishing, Facet Publishing, MDPI, Nanyang Technological University, RDMLA, Rutgers University again, University at Albany, my former employer, University of Toronto, and Wiley. Finally, I have to single out a few people for special thanks. The annual meeting planning committee chair, Ian Ruthven, and vice chair, Heather O'Brien, with huge help from the rest of the planning committee and our excellent executive director, Lydia Middleton, and Kathy Nash. Somebody told me yesterday, every time they get that code for the app, they say, she sent it personally, so that's how hard she works. So, yep, she did. And also several of you who really served as manuscript reviewers and everyone who contributed in one way or another to efforts to organize such a great annual meeting. And I think you all deserve a huge round of applause. So let's give them a round of applause again. Thank you so much. Yep. Now, I would like to invite Ian to come to the stage to be recognized and to share more about the annual meeting and all the wonderful content and what you expect in the next few days, sorry. Yep. I hope you stay here until a few weeks. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So let's hold for picture.
I'll take a picture.
Let's take a picture. You take picture after. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, baby.
Sorry, I'm just gonna.
You go. Okay.
You start talking.
I'm going to say a few words about the conference. Well, Lydia Ches. Oh, thank you very much. So the conference theme this year is Making a Difference, translating information research into practice, policy, and action. And this was a theme designed to celebrate the transformational power of information to improve people's lives and to achieve social justice. To reflect the conference theme, we introduced a new topic for contributions of research into practice, for contributions describing translational research. And I'm very pleased to say we had 37 contributions across papers, posters, workshops, and the doctoral colloquium, of which 17 were accepted for presentation at the conference. So thank you for responding to this conference theme, which I know speaks to a lot of what a lot of you do in your research and in your practice. The big headlines, of course, are the record number of submissions we received for the conference this year. Thank you for making life very difficult for us in deciding what to do. But it was great to see all these contributions coming in, and we had some really difficult choices about what to accept. The acceptance rate for the papers is 33%, which is kind of lower than usual for annual meetings, but it was only this high because we took in extra space, so there's more sessions, and we reduced the presentation lengths for full papers by 5 minutes to allow us to take on more contributions, to hear more presentations from you. We also got a big increase in the number of panels and alternative events. You like your panels at ASIS, and again, it was a really difficult choice in what to accept, but it was a great choice. We had so many great submissions, which means you have a great choice of what to attend, but also a difficult choice because you can't be in two places at once. So we hope you make careful choices. We also saw a big increase in the number of posters this year, and again, fantastic to see all these contributions coming in. The acceptance rate for posters was over 50%. We wanted to make this type of contribution more inclusive and more achievable for people submitting. We could only do this by having, as Baby said, a second poster session. So we're going to have a poster session tonight in conjunction with the welcome reception. The posters will be on display both days, today and tomorrow, from 10 o'clock to 5:45, and then the presenters will come along at 5:45 in conjunction with the receptions and present their posters. As many of you know, the people presenting posters at ASIS&T are often either presenting for the first time at ASIS&T or the first time in their research career. So we're really keen to make this a positive, constructive, engaging discussion with the poster presenters. So please do go along, chat to people, welcome them to ASIS&T, welcome them to information science research. We also saw big increases in the doctoral colloquium numbers. So we received 32 submissions and accepted 16. And if you're in the doctoral colloquium this year, congratulations. It was a big achievement to get in, and welcome to your research career within information science. And we hope you make ASIS&T your intellectual home for your research. We have a big thank you to a lot of people who took on an unexpected amount of work this year. I really thank you. I'm going to say who they are and then ask them to stand so we can appreciate them. In charge of the papers this year were Vivian Petras and Rebecca Reynolds. In charge of panels and alternative events, Alison Hicks and Alex Poole. Thank you. In charge of posters, all of them, June Abbas and Dana Mackay. Thank you. And again, for several years now, the doctoral colloquium, a very important event for ASIS&T, was handled by Penina Fishman and Howard Rosenbaum. Are you here? Please stand. Oh, there. Thank you, thank you. I also have to thank colleagues at ASIS&T, to Lydia, to Kathy, to Kim, to Pam, and to Garrett for all their huge amount of work, especially to Kathy, who did a lot of email in the last few months. Thank you all. Thank you. And I want to pay a personal thanks on behalf of all of us to Heather. So the way the ASIS annual meetings are working now, each track in the conference itself has a chair and a co-chair. And one rolls off, the other one rolls on. So this year, Heather's my co-chair, and she'll be chair of the annual meeting next year, and she'll tell us about this later on in the conference. If you've had the pleasure of working with Heather, you know she's very calm, very constructive, and always a pleasure to work with. On behalf of us all, thank you, Heather. Especially on you. This year, another innovation was to introduce a senior program committee. Even before we saw the numbers of contributions coming in, Vivian and Rebecca were very keen to introduce a senior program committee for two reasons. First of all, so that more of you can be involved in the decision making about what we accept for the conference, but also to enhance the reviewing process. A lot of people reviewed, there's a lot of reviews. We wanted to make sure the reviews are appropriate, they're constructive, and they're useful, but also to help us, decide what are the best contributions to accept for the program. So I'm going to show you who the senior program committee are in a minute, but this group of people went and did, they went the extra mile, and they did a lot of work that helped us understand the contributions and make the best selections for presentation at the conference. One thing I will say is that what you all did as reviewers was really honoured. When we looked at the rankings of the papers and we saw what was accepted, really what you recommended we accept were the ones that we accepted. And the senior program committee just enhanced this whole process. So we have trust that you as a peer review community chose what we're going to see at the conference. But the senior program committee this year, and I want to ask them to stand just so we can appreciate them, are these talented colleagues who went extra and did some extra work for the conference this year. Please, if you're on the senior program committee, could you stand just for a minute? There you go. Thank you all. And I know Rebecca and Vivian are really grateful for all your efforts on behalf of us. We also have a lot of people presenting here, and we have over 500 people registered for the conference, and I think that's a great milestone for this community, and it's great to have you all here, representing 32 different countries, a really global research conversation. And over 200 of you, nearly 200 of you, are attending your first ASIS meeting. We are very welcome. And we hope we continue to come back to the annual meetings and be part of the ASIS community. So thank you for coming. Thank you for presenting your research here this year. I know what you're thinking, with all these new people and all this great content, how am I going to navigate around this conference? Well, if you haven't done it already, please download the ASIS app from your preferred app supplier. Some of the emails you're getting out have formatting slightly distorted, so the times look odd. If in doubt, Lydia says, trust the app, which is a lesson for life. Trust the ASIS app, not individuals. But do use the app. It's a very good tool and very helpful for navigating a complex program. Okay, I now have the very pleasurable job of giving out some awards for contributions, but also for reviewer service. So at each of these awards, I'm going to read out the names, and I'm going to invite the award winners as a group to come up and receive a certificate and a firm handshake from me. Okay, so for the best full paper, please join me in congratulating Morgan, Andrea, Vanessa, Nick, Valerie, Travis, and Alex. Please. If you're here, please. Congratulations, everyone. Okay. For best short, can I just say, just before I go into the short paper, look at these topics. Really great, modern, vibrant, creative topics that I know reflect what a lot of us in the community are thinking about at the moment. So really great to see, as are the topics for the best short paper. Again, really modern, worthwhile topics, and great to see these in the conference. So please join me in congratulating Sarah, Sebastian, Tyler, Chern Lee, and Ailsa. Congratulations, well done. Please join. Well done, everyone. Thank you. And for best posters, again, modern, interesting topics. Please join me in congratulating Yuwen, Wen Ning. Please come up as I'm reading your names. Julie, Pao Kai, Hing Wan, Wai, Aaron, Joan, Minsoon, Hiren, Hayan, and Hayan. Congratulations. Thank you. So, yes. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, and now we want to give out some certificates for reviewer service. People have gone the extra mile in doing and reviewing this year. So for best panel reviewers, Sarah, you shouldn't have sat down. Sarah, Yuan, and Yin, please, if you're here, come on. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, there you are. Kathy trusted me with this, and I've already. We'll give them a laughter. Let's. For best posters, Ben, Jujin, and Nick. I think Nick is not here. Please. Ben, congratulations. Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have awards for best paper reviewers. There's too many people to bring up on stage, so we'll have the certificates you can get later. But whoops, I'm missing slides. You can thank all these people. We'll have on the website. We're not an information society. And now go back to my script that Kathy gives me, which says, don't forget. So I'm going to say, don't forget the closing session, the closing plenary will be on Tuesday, 1:15 in this room, and will include lunch. And our closing keynote will be Dr. Stuart Hamilton, who's going to talk about what works in library advocacy. So lots of interesting lessons from Stuart. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers for you today. Two really interesting, talented, and remarkable people, Alison Phipps and Tawona Sithole. Alison Phipps is the UNESCO Chair in Refugee Integration through Languages and Arts at the University of Glasgow and Professor of Languages and Intercultural Studies. Alison uses creative, decolonising and restorative methods to teach widely in refugee studies, critical and multilingual studies, religious and spiritual education, anthropology and education for nonviolence. She's published many books, which your bookshelf is not complete if you don't have. So look her up on Amazon. And she's received many awards for her work, including for her talents as a teacher, and I think that's very important, including an honorary degree from the University of Edinburgh in recognition of inspirational and extraordinary research and work with refugees and multilingual and multicultural communities. She is also just back from Canada, where she's receiving an honorary degree from the University of Waterloo for her marvellous research. Congratulations, Alison. She's an ambassador for the Scottish Refugee Council and is an academic, activist, educator and published poet. Tawona Sithole is a poet, playwright, Mbira musician, educator, facilitator and research associate for the Migration for Development and Equality Research Project. His ancestral family name, Ganya Matopi, is a reminder of his heritage, which inspires him to make connections with other people through creativity and the natural outlook to learn. As co-founder of the Seeds for Thought Arts Group, Tawona's work involves supporting and facilitating access to the creative arts. I know you're going to really enjoy what they have prepared for us, and they've taken a long time and thought in preparing this for us. Ganya Matopi, Alison, you honour us with your presence, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
For all those of you who are presenting at your first ASIS&T conference, join the club. It's an absolute delight to be with you. I feel deeply honoured to have been invited by Ian to join you today, and especially because Ian has been so open to the creative proposals that we made for how we might address this particular wonderful topic that you have as part of your own provocation to yourselves in the discipline around social justice, around translational research. I particularly want to thank Ian and Heather for their hospitality and warmth and care, to Kathy, who clearly has many clones, given the number of emails that she's capable of sending, but also all the work she does behind the scenes, and to Abebe, to you as president, for hosting this particular meeting. I also would like to thank the team that I have back in Glasgow, who do an awful lot of work to make sure that we can be in the places we need to be to do the work we need to do. And to thank all the people working behind the scenes, but particularly this morning, George and Johan, who are on the sound and tech desks. And you all know how important the sound and the tech is for this. It's a serious thing, says the poet Mary Oliver, just to be alive on this fresh morning in the broken world. In his address to the UNESCO chairs in November last year, Achille Mbembe, the great philosopher from South Africa, said, "Les savoirs doivent circuler." Knowledge must circulate, or knowledges must circulate. And in it, he said we must draw from all the archives of the world. In old African cosmology, he said there was no difference between economy, society, and culture. The great fragility of ecosystem means maintaining the planet, which is needed for a knowledge commons, which allows the reproduction of materials for life. And the UNESCO Deputy General for Education said, this sets the tone for the direction of the work of UNESCO for the next 20 years. Different cosmologies brought in to attach to and work alongside those Western cosmologies or Northern cosmologies, depending which of the ordinals we wish to take, which are bringing in new directions and new perspectives. Les savoirs doivent circuler. Knowledges should circulate, must circulate. Economy, society, and culture are also words that in ancient Greek were used to describe the same thing with the same word. Oikos, meaning the home, the economy, and the environment. And that these areas that we've split off into many different realms, I think Mbembe is inviting us to begin to think together again. for making a difference, translating information research into practice, policy, and action. I'm going to speak about all of those dimensions, but maybe not in ways you're always familiar with. But first of all, I really want to congratulate you as an association on what I read in the call for this conference as being a call to justice, to cultural justice, to social justice, to economic justice, and also to the justice that is truth, reconciliation, and peace building. To your call to a critical understanding of the fact that all is not well in our work within universities and your work within libraries, within information sciences, within archives. A moment of a call in what is a revolutionary moment for knowledge across the academy to live with that felt sense that we have of the trouble with our methods, which don't quite cut it for social justice. The trouble with our epistemic frameworks, which we know are rooted in too many violences. But the need not to stay in that fraught place of blame, be it of self or be it of others, which only leads us into positions and questions of attempted purity, which say, do you condemn? Do you condemn? And position people into places where the only place we can stand in is in a place of condemnation, but rather, as I interpret your call, to say, let's translate, and let's use translational research as a primary facilitator of social and cultural integration and of healing. Healing our information, our knowledge, our methods, our disciplines. And doing it within the spaces and what we have, and seeing these as ceremonies of welcome, ritual, song and silence, antidotes to violence. And just as I was reading the titles of some of those amazing papers and posters that have won prizes, what is a wave but 1,000 drops working together? The sheer poetry of the justice of a commons that is an oikos cosmology, the home that is the local beach, that is the economy that allows the leisure to go down to the seashore, that is that presence, being and watching, the way that the sea curates the archive of what lives within the oceans and brings it up onto our shorelines. So my congratulations to you and my praise to you for being in a place of asking those questions. Because as the theologian Walter Brueggemann says, the dominant scripts of our societies, the dominant scripts are scripts of therapeutic, technocratic, consumer militarism. And those scripts have failed. They cannot make us safe, and they cannot make us happy. And that in the work we do right across the academy, finding what well-being and happiness might be for us through our research has become an urgent question for the work that we do. And in it, and this was the real joy in your invitation to us, we see in our work, in our practice, libraries in particular, and the work you do as information scientists and technologists, as sanctuary makers and as lifelines. And you may not know it yourselves, and really what I'm giving you here is just a description as an anthropologist of what I see happening in the libraries I visit around the world. And in all of them, I see people making their first home who may be homeless and new to a place. I see people who find a place to be warm. I see people who walk in and visit, and as Ian was saying to us yesterday, just over dinner, maybe that person they speak to on the welcome desk is the only person they will speak to that day. I see in the work of Angela and Adrian Crease an extraordinary ability of people doing welcome to trans language, to speak in whatever languages are available to them, including hands and feet and gestures, to show people how or where to go or where to sit. I see many people seeking asylum in libraries, putting together their claims, using the free IT, the ability to have a log-on, to do the research they need to do, to find a way to make their claims. I sit myself in the British Library in the African section, and I'm surrounded by all the languages of that continent. And I know that monolingual research is not only dead, but has really never been alive. It's always been a fallacy. During our periods of lockdown, we invited the local group, Maryhill Integration Network, an extraordinary group of activists, campaigners, singers, women and men coming together to make a sanctuary and a home themselves, to do a virtual warm welcome site of their area, all the places where they make home. And of course, Maryhill Library was number one. This place is so important to local New Scots, they said. New Scots is a term that people seeking asylum or people granted refugee status use to describe themselves in Scotland, because it gets away from some of those xenophobic labels. And they say, I go to the library, I go every day to read, to use the computer, to borrow books or CDs. People go here to study and to do research. A few years ago, I was lucky enough to spend a day in New York Public Library. This is the poem, New York Public Library. A little as Abebe was saying of London, there is a whole city to play in, a whole day to explore. The warmth of springtime has turned in a day the branches from winter to green. The beat and the brightness, the buildings and basements, the beautiful, bold, yet terrible vision of what money can make. The museums list themselves out, their tours and exhibits and objects lost and found. I'm drawn to the river, the bridges, the banks of the east and the west. I'm drawn to the harbour and garden squares, and the first chance to be again outside at a table drinking. But this is not what I choose. The longings of wartime, the peculiar patterns of desire for books lead me to the public library, to the place of quiet, a quiet that is like that of the reverence of a cathedral, the quiet of heads bent over words and pages, like those in an attitude of prayer. As in the cathedrals and chapels of great cities, so too the libraries hold those who find this is also a place to abide, to sleep, to take rest from hunger and cold. Along the artist's walkway, forwards up the marble steps, past the white men and their pens, and the white women who broke through onto a white published page, to sit, my white fingers flying across a writing board, soul finding its grounding again in words, oblivious to where I am in the world. Other than that, there is reading, and I am writing again. In quite a lot of our work at the moment within the UNESCO Chair, we are curating a number of funded projects funded by the UK Research Initiative. And this work is work funded under the programme called the Global Challenge Research Fund. So we're grateful to our funders for funding this. We're not as grateful to them for cutting it by 80% overnight in order to balance the Brexit books. And particularly not for the position that it led our colleagues right across low to middle income countries funded by overseas development assistance. One of those projects is a project called MIDEC, which is a Migration, Inequality and Development research project looking at South-South migration, because of course 80% of migration occurs across the global South. And we were really keen to document how people gain information when they're migrating, but also what people bring with them culturally. And to do this on a household survey that bears comparison with international household surveys, and therefore can maybe for the first time in a revolutionary moment of changing a question on a survey form, lead us to a place where we might begin to ask comparative questions. Our colleague Tim Unwin, who's UNESCO Chair for Digital Education, said that digital interventions intended to benefit migrants are often developed by well-intentioned outsiders without sufficient understanding of migrants' real needs or awareness of how they are already using such technologies. And therefore it's scarcely surprising that they fail to have their intended impact. When we were looking at cultural data, we asked people to tell us what proverb or saying or prayer do you carry with you in your body to keep you safe? How does language make a sanctuary? What object has been with you all the way? And is there anything else that you always have with you? There's a commonality in the answer to one of those questions, and that, of course, is the phone. And that's where you all are, present as lifelines, the place of information. What I was scrolling at 4 a.m. this morning when I realized that yes, the electricity and the internet were back on in the Gaza Strip. And I could see that my colleagues and research associates working with me on these projects were indeed still alive. The way the ticks go from 1 grey to 2 grey and your heart beats faster. Those are the lifelines that information sciences are making possible and sharing and storing. Achille Mbembe, in his wonderful book, The Post-Colony, says, we should first remind ourselves that as a general rule, the experience of the other or the problem of the I of others and of human beings we perceive as foreign to us has almost always posed virtually insurmountable difficulties to the Western philosophical and political tradition. In other words, the way we have built the majority of our disciplines means we cannot see into cosmologies and epistemologies beyond our own. And that if we are really serious about translational research, we have to often start in a very different place. So your invitation to me, your hospitality to myself and to my colleague Tawona to do our work with you, to me is an invitation that you're also giving to yourselves to explore different ways of knowing, of translating, of storing, and of storying. In one of the most memorable lectures I ever heard, I listened to Vern Harris, who's recently published an extraordinary book called Ghosts of Archive. And he was, of course, responsible for archiving the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And he offered the question to us as to how we convene information, how we convene knowledge and what it means to do that. Convening the archive was his task, but it's a wider one for all of us. Convenir is the root of that word, literally meaning to come together, to gather for a common purpose, or as you would say in Te Reo Māori, of a kaupapa, of a common agreed way of doing things. And he says that conveners like yourselves in convening information, convening books and archives and documents, convening drops of water into a wave, conveners must be adept at surfacing and engaging the play of power and must be willing to get their hands dirty. They must enable an unavoidably messy hospitality. Now, this is not something we associate with librarians and archivists and people doing cataloguing. We associate, certainly in folklore and folk stories of libraries and librarians, order, calm, clear lines, ways of doing things that have been passed down, even if behind the scenes it all looks very different. But I think this is an important challenge to us if we're going to start exploring other epistemological frameworks, to be unavoidably messy in our hospitality. And those who come to sleep in the spaces, those who come to do their asylum claims in the spaces, those are the people we learn from and know with. Because as Rowan Williams has said, thought, real thought, thought worthy of the name of thought, begins in the middle of the mess. The authentically political arises out of a commitment to a certain mode of thought, to thought in a certain mode, thought aware of its production, its own vulnerability, and its own commitment to risk. And this isn't easy, because it means breaking with the traditions, the things that we've laid down for many years. In my own area of research at the moment, and I was recently speaking to a neighboring discipline in a plenary of applied linguists and saying, it's a bit like being your neighbor who's coming along and saying, that tree that you love to look at, well, it really needs a bit of a prune because I can't see and it's not quite as beautiful as you think it is. But if you think about the discourse that pervades academia, certainly in my line of work, it represents a seriously extractivist attitude to knowledge. The life-saving discourse of the Anthropocene is what Michael Cronin has called the fossil fuel of rhetoric, which we burn in the universities. I love that phrase. And look at what we talk about. We talk about mining the data, codifying, cleansing, capturing. I've actually lost count of the number of meetings I go to where people say, we've got to capture that. And for my people, the people I work with and serve, my friends, my family, my colleagues, to capture or to cleanse is a terrible thing. With the legacies of slavery they bear in their bodies, the legacies of torture and trafficking experienced, the ethnic cleansing, the idea that we might capture and cleanse maybe suggests to us that at this moment in our work of decentering and decolonizing and translating, we might just attend to how we speak. And for this, of course, we'll always need poets. Because we're really not about an open strip mining and about methodological violence and extractivist concepts. Colonial knowledge production built in the violence of the Anthropocene to ourselves and to our home as the oikos of planet Earth is the work of bringing it in, of capturing it, of storing it. But what might it mean to think with the more than human world? And as Akomolafe has said, it's become toxic to our survival. The conceptual colonialisms which describe and perform it are no longer good, he says, if they ever were. And so we are under an imperative, all of us at the moment, with our many paymasters, to be coherent, to be transparent, to be efficient, to be obedient, to be translatable, to often be mono, to be algorithmerizable. And yet, as the great scholar Glisson has said, maybe our survival will depend on not knowing, on cultural humility, on forms and ways of being poets, of listening into cosmologies other than our own.
Ekani. 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 Ndiniganya matobedza pasi. Zvinofaza segwe tree pano. I woke up and tickled a lion. I'm unaware. Life is determined in the body of knowledge. Where were you when we were in awe? Theater thrives on artistic license and accustomed silence. Those who are allowed are allowed as they cast spells. The enchanted keep succumbing to the S-P-E-L-L-S. 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 The enchanted keep succumbing to the feeling of kneeling at the altercation of stories. Panota demo mpinyu chisara. Wordplay like swordplay, fire breathers and swashbucklers, frostbiters and bus smugglers, close call and far-fetched at the altercation of stories. Author's pen, artist's pencil, prized by avid antagonists, strapped on as makeshift stilts to teeter, 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 and tower in desperation for elevation at the altercation of stories. Author's pen and artist's pencil, prized by avid antagonists, scratched on as ambitious draw wings to flap, 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 and fly in desperation for elevation at the altercation of stories. Panocha demo mpini uchisara. I spent the day nudging wasps. Amunawe, life is determined in the body of knowledge. Where were you when we were in awe? Theater thrives on pure dramatics and sound acoustics. Those that are sound are the raconteur as they entrance. The enchanted fulfill the entrance to the moving, vivid world of their own picturing. Volume, velocity, variety. Line up and move in formation. Volume, velocity, variety, line up and move in formation. Akudana nonzwa. It's a stuttery entrance. I mean, it's a stuttery entrance. But before you know it, hapless hopeful meets wise guide. But the wisdom entered has not been recognized. But before you know it, it's the book of ancient spells. But comes unstuck on the GLUE. Trundles with insufficient bundles, data bundles. But before you know it, love sings and war cries. Elation, elevation to the sky. To return to the main menu, press star. Akudana nonzwa. I rose up and hugged an eagle. Amunawe, life is determined in the body of knowledge. Where were you when we were in awe? Theater thrives on stage. And backstage, those who make it possible. As they do the rigging, the enchanted cannot help it. Spontaneity of the jigging. Shelving inhibition, delving into the exhibition. Chains, change, and unsettled objects. Simbaitizwe. Obatwebas. Simbaitizwe. Obatwebas. What would the whoosh of the Magic Express be without a conductor? Maintaining poise in the swervy sway of pondering pasts and figuring futures. Crossing with you without anything to declare. So it's only fair that you pay your fare. What would the whoosh of the classic concert be without the conductor to disambiguate the timbres? From the sensational tone of those who purvey to the unemotional tone of the ordnance survey. What would the whoosh of electricity be without a conductor? Response, ability, elasticity, whatever the current eccentricity, life is determined in the body of knowledge. Where were you when we were in awe of that reassuring frown of a detective without a crime, strict without sting, grace without fatigue? Lending, attending, tending to be kind, just kind. Lending, attending, tending to be lifelines. I got down and tickled the shark. Amunawe, life is determined in the body of knowledge. Where were you when we were in awe? Theater thrives on weighted blankets and suspended beliefs. Those who are weighted on as they try to order seeings, beings, believings, the enchanted view open lexicon. But if the definition is demeaning, the early bird catches the bookworm. Because between the home and the field, a road is built, a path is ground, dust rises to the rhythm of eardrums. Overdue return is outstanding. Free spirit is not a description, but earnest protest. Free spirit. As cave wall is to touch screen, the earliest library was a librarian. Everything known is borrowed. Everything owned is given. Life is determined in the body of knowledge. Where were you when we were in awe? Where were we when we were in awe? Because Zambia who's again.
Hey, Kani. Kani Matope Zapase, thank you so much for responding to our invitation to write a praise poem to information scientists and technologists to mark the entry of the African chapter into ASIS&T. Thank you, Tawona. And you might want to listen to that again sometime because the word plays are quite exquisite. There were many things in there I didn't notice to start with, like the word play on information. And the bookworm. I mean, yeah, I can't get the colleagues. So returning to the more central question of what it means to work like this, bringing in the cosmologies, the poets, the ways of thinking with what we do that we are not accustomed to, that will be messy, that won't go in the ways we think. I've been turning to what was my book of the year last year, which is a book called The Dawn of Everything. A New History of Humanity by the late, great David Graeber and David Wengrow, a book by an anthropologist and an archaeologist that took 12 years to write. As you can see, the title tends to hubris, but it's actually also, rather like your own, an invitation to think towards a more accurate and hopeful history of humanity. And it came out of looking at what happened to the archaeological record when the Berlin Wall came down, and when people started to travel globally and realized that actually the story we told of hunter-gatherers moving in small bands across the world into agrarian societies and then civilization as a linear pattern was, as Scots would say, mince. Or as Graeber and Wengrow say, mostly wrong, extremely dangerous, and I love this, unnecessarily dull. And they invite us into rethinking human history based on the archaeological and therefore also the anthropological record into a way that is more joyful and more hopeful and more resistant. And so we convene in the room, wherever our room is, in the space, wherever our space is. And what we've been doing within the UNESCO Chair for Refugee Integration through Languages and the Arts, in theory I sit on the chair, but actually we made a lot of cushions and we sit in a circle in the team on the floor. Then we've been trying to say what happens when we do this with different companions to the usual subjects, when it's not just those who are in the academy. What happens when we work with poets and spirits and ancestors, with objects and cave paintings and rocks and a calabash. And always thinking technology as techne, as whatever it is to hand that we might bricolage with, often a thread or a stone or a stick, or whatever somebody's got on their phone, whatever information people have convened and curated as information scientists themselves, because we're all information scientists now. How do we do it when we might take a symbol or an object and use that as our means or our method? And we're just going to take the example of the calabash as a means or a method that we've just started to think with as both theory and method and practice and vessel for impact. And we'll just let you move it around and hold it and see how it feels and make a bit of a mess with a calabash. This one's from Kenya. It's beautifully carved. We started working with a calabash with a group of people where it was very hard to share a language in the Dangbe rainforest in Ghana. And we were determined not to work in English. When my body's in a room, everyone speaks in English. Und deshalb habe ich an dem Tag nur Deutsch geredet. And that changed everything because everyone was in their home language, their language of comfort, and we couldn't understand one another, and therefore we were all on the same basis. And an extraordinary thing happened. And we started to just pass an object round and speak into it and play with it and tap it and dance with it and move with it. And it became both symbolic of our togetherness, of our convening, of our curating, of our holding, but also generative. It was extraordinary what a calabash could become. We weren't dealing, therefore, with documentary accuracy about information. We were moving into cosmologies, we were making together worlds of fantasy, but doing it with a symbol of the land in the way that Gania Matope Zapase was offering you in that beautiful poem. A symbol of the land, but also of risk, a risk of not understanding what people were doing. And of a calabash as we threw it with grace and awkwardness around a room that was always at risk of breaking, and did in our rehearsals for a dance piece eventually break into many pieces that we then picked up and shared, coloured in, wrote on, gifted one another, creative of entanglements, contoured and curved, not looking at linear patterns, as Lederach and Lederach say, those project-driven mentalities and Gantt charts that tell us a fallacy that all will go in a straight line when it never goes according to plan. So the calabash has become our symbolic theory of how we might work to hold, but it's also tangible. It's not something that's in words held as ontology, trumping epistemology. It's something we touch and stroke and feel and is tactile. But it's also our method, a place of risk-taking and devising. It creates ceremony, because when now we walk into a room quietly, carefully, reverently with a calabash, people know something's going to happen, that a space will be convened, not for fee-paying strangers, but for us as community. And we start to ask ourselves questions of this method. Who holds the calabash? Who listens to her? Who controls the movement, the trajectory? Who is the author and the authorizer of any form of information and improvisation? What happens when the calabash escapes? It allows us to think about all those books and all those articles that land on desks in different places around the world at a click star, press the star, all those ways in which new cosmologies are entered into, and those books are convened in people's living rooms and homes and on their phones, moving around unscripted without the algorithms to control all those hidden ways of being. So for us, the calabash is both the center of our cosmological worlds of working, but also the circumference, the far edge, as it moves around and travels, and we lose it. And the calabash changes the space as it's changing our space now. It makes people laugh and smile, feel important when they have it and they carry it. It doesn't just contain, but it translates and connects. Wherever the calabash goes, all our creativity, our worries, our shared values and unknowns are taken with us, moving a little like a book, a little like an object, a little like that journal article that we have underlined 1,000 times because it told us where to go and how to be. The calabash changes and morphs as a powerful fetish of the spirit of the company whose work it is doing. And the one that travels with us contains the touch of all the different spaces of convening. But it's also led us into actions that are impactful. I don't like that word, but I'll stay with it for now. Our calabash became a common kitchen. When I travel across borders carrying a calabash, the people at the borders doing the airport scanning say, "My mother used to make porridge in one of those. That's how we make yogurt. We drink palm wine out of this. We call this a daisy. We call this a gourd. We give this different names." And I am in those cosmologies and languages of the ways in which people store and make knowledge. We've used it as a common kitchen. We've used it to microfinance employment in small communities. We've used it to pass around a circle like a talking stick as our decision-making structures try and find something that is post-democratic and consensual in spaces where there are no minutes and there are no advisory boards that we would recognize, but rather a circular accountability and responsibility, that the calabash becomes a tradition bearer, passed on and passed into spaces, a symbol of caretaking and of holding space, and also, importantly, of reciprocity. Because the people we've worked with, we also worked with the UK Border Agency, who refused 22 of the 24 applications for visas to bring the young people from the Dangbe rainforest to dance at my inaugural UNESCO lecture, saying that they couldn't possibly know me. And we had a little fight. It was quite public. You can read about it in the Guardian newspaper. And eventually they all came, and this is them dancing at the annual Solas Festival in a great field in Highland Perthshire, wondering for the first time as they experience June in Scotland from the equatorial light that means the sun always sets at 6 o'clock, and asking me, "Alison, when do we go to bed?" We had the chance for everyone to be part of the calabash and sing this little song on, let me see if I can find, where's it gone? It's the arrow at the bottom, I'm just trying to... Just getting everybody up and joining in. Everybody, bring your calabash, bring your calabash. And the space that was convened by the musicians on stage and the axis becomes a space that is everyone's, apart from the guy in the brown jumper who you can probably see. That's my husband. So what are we learning from working in these ways, these unpredictable ways? Well, again, as Walter Brueggemann says, the new world is not given whole any more than the new self is given abruptly in psychotherapy. It's given only a little at a time, one poem, one healing, one pronouncement, one promise, one commandment, one calabash at a time. This is slow work, and in this return to the decolonial turn that was ushered in by people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Frantz Fanon and Edouard Glissant, we're at the beginning again. Always we begin again. Koziva Mubuya Hudzwa. The title of Tawona's poem means learning comes through listening. And this is some of the work that we've been doing around the world, trying to listen in, really using myself as a person who clicks on a button to mean that money moves from the rich to the low to middle income countries, and people can decide how to make with it themselves, figuring it out through the arts from below. And it's your job to figure out how to curate and store and information manage all of this. And through it, we're discovering that our method is a method of joy and tears, and that is important. Yes, the objectivity of interviews and surveys matters, but alongside, how can we bring restorative sense of felt joy and well-being to people as we do it? Performing an eros of aliveness against death, rather as Cavarero speaks in her extraordinary work about inclination, where she says of a king who is deadened by the dull tones of the realm, that the voice of a woman singing can make the world feel alive again. Come away in, come away in. The storm, it is rising, but we'll hold back the wind. Come away in. So just as I'm wrapping up, to give you some examples of ways we've been working with policy and practice and calabash methods and theories. This is a quilt that traveled all the way from Mexico City to Ghana in a suitcase. The quilt was made by hundreds of women. The women were the relatives of women who had been killed for being women, for no other reason, through femicide, and who were not documented by the state. There is no record in any archive or library. There is no record or information in technology of their deaths. Rather, as the corpse of a child that a friend of mine sent a picture of me today at 4 o'clock this morning, a one-day-old baby whose death certificate was written on their shroud before their birth certificate could be written. But this is the policy document that the collectivas, the women, have created, saying we knew these women, and this is a bird and a flower that represents them. And we have embroidered their name, and we have made this and dropped it from the tower in front of all the ministries to say that femicide must stop. And we will remember them, even when your technologies are not sufficient to do it. Our needle and thread and collectivity is. These are the women who've survived domestic violence in the Gaza Strip under siege. coming together in a theatre festival to perform short stories that they've written, having been taught to write short stories in Arabic and in English for their children that will help them survive the siege, the aggression, the occupation. Many of these women have died in the last 2 weeks. But the calabash can hold them, and we can remember them. And our work can remember all who are dying in this conflict, and know that our work is enduring because it is, as Van Harris has said, a work of hauntings, a work with ghosts. One of the hauntings that our colleague Hiab Johannes has brought to bear is with stones that he treasured from his native Eritrea as he made his way to live with us and work with us in Glasgow. And Hiab found a home in the Crannog Centre, an archaeological reconstruction of an Iron Age settlement that was built as an island in the middle of Loch Tay in the Highlands of Scotland, midge-infested Highlands of Scotland. To Hiab, the stones are important. The stones are stones that were clutched by people in their hands after an occupying force had come into the village and asked to separate the Muslims from the Christians. And that village said no, because we are of this land and this village, and we will not be separated. We will not go to our mosque and our church. We will stay together. And in the end, they all went into the mosque, and they were all slaughtered. And they were holding the land, the stone, the cosmology, the first librarian, the first archive. And Hiab brought these to be in a place which is not as troubled and unsettled and violent as his homeland. And he offered them in an act of reverse decoloniality and said to the Crannog Centre, I trust you. I love what you're doing in this imagination of a world that is decolonial, that is pre-colonial, that is the first place I felt at home and not required to give my fingerprint to be stored on a computer and used as information against me for the rest of my life. Have my stones. And so the Crannog Centre did the work of provenance that orderly curators and archivists do, and discovered, and this is where we get goosebumps, that the quartz from the seam laid down in Eritrea in the lowlands came from a seam that also emerges through the site where the Crannog was laid down 2,500 years ago. And they've curated those stones together with Hiab, a curator for the first time, into their exhibition alongside other stones that were worked and used, and bring us into imaginings of how people might have lived. And coming to one of my final slides and final examples for you, another place of storage and curation. These are the Red Roads flats, made out of concrete. The concrete that means that half our schools are closed down at the moment in the UK because it's crumbling and it's full of asbestos. And these were flats which were scheduled for detonation, for demolition during the Commonwealth Games in 2014. As an act of celebration. You can imagine how the families felt who lived in these places at the thought that they might be blown up as an act of celebration. So after a bit of protest, instead, the communities came together with academics and activists and with ourselves, under the direction of my colleague Rebecca Kay, to sing goodbye to the Red Road flats. If you look at these flats really carefully, you can see that there's a line of sheets hanging up, that the children in the schools nearby dipped into colours to say, this colour stores my feeling about living in these flats. And Safedem, the demolition company, hung them up around the flats and they fluttered in the breeze. And it was only when they were up there that we realised they were like Tibetan prayer flags. And if you look really closely, you can see that actually the flats aren't really flats, they're more like a giant ghetto blaster. And our curators and archivists went in and they recorded the songs that people sang in different languages to their children, the lullabies, the the funny songs, that famous Glaswegian anthem, "You canna shove your granny off a bus." You can't shove your grandmother off a bus, but you can shove your other granny off a bus. You can throw your father's mother off a bus. Those songs that people sang, and we put them and we got them played through that giant ghetto blaster to the city. And then we got people to, I never thought I'd say these words, to come together in a choir using Mongolian throat singing techniques that would resonate out of the stomach, the hips, the calabash of the body, and mean that people could pick a pitch that told them how they felt about these flats and hum their goodbye to them. Our practice-led arts and cultural research are leading us into intentional multilingualism and a whole realm of worlds. Intentional artistry, intentional movement building and fugitivity, improvisational practice, and also permaculture design, using those ecological theories of how we might live and how we might work. This is a tiny clip of this happening as a little dance piece from the Dangbei forest, symbolizing the bird that flies after the last sky. And it just, even though it's on a Shugli iPhone, gives you a sense of a little of the grace that I've been speaking of. So I'm coming to my last slide. And just want to leave you with the words of a singer-songwriter whose song I was just singing to you, Corinne Polwart. She's our leading folk musician. And she really, I think, has given us some words that we might use to think with and to live with. She talks about this time of year. She says, in September, the geese snake in across the Firth of Forth from their summer nests in Greenland and the coastal cliffs of Iceland, clattering and honking in ever-shifting seams. My garden is a flight path. I watch, I listen. The outstretched wingtips of each migrating goose create an upwash, a pocket of wind resistance for the geese tucked in, behind and below. These nukes of ease, she says, these aerodynamic sanctuaries, they cut the drag by up to 65%. It's a wonder, and also a gale-bitten struggle to sustain cooperation. Every goose takes a turn, stepping up, falling back, laboring and resting, stepping up, falling back, laboring and resting. Like skyborn socialists, she says, no lone bird bears the brunt. It's a gorgeous symbiotic dance. Stepping up, falling back, laboring and resting. Stepping up, falling back, laboring and resting. But I fear for the weather to come, she says, and we're not going to make it alone.
Thank you both so much. Alison, your beautiful words and concepts are seeds that I think will stimulate a lot of conversations over the next few days. Tawona, your praise poem was not just a gift, it was a blessing on us. So thank you both for your kindness and your inspiration. I know we've got a bit of time for some questions if you're happy to take. If anybody's got any questions, just please put up your hand. We've got some microphones, various places. Please. And if we could, just to get to know each other, because I know a lot of people here for the first time, could you just give your name and institution? I'm going to start with the person we all know, Gary.
Gary Marcinini, UNC Chapel Hill. Fantastic. This was amazing. Was this recorded? Yeah, it was audio recorded. Okay, great. And then can you make sure that we can access that? Because this has to go beyond this, 400 or 500 people.
Okay,
Yeah?
thank you.
Great, thank you.
Our whole community will benefit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michael.
I'm going to say more or less the same as Gary. Inspiring is an overused word. So I've been thinking how to express how your work made me feel. So I'm going to steal from someone rather more eloquent. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. You have brought that fire to us. I think it's going to take a lot of time for us to appreciate that gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Hello, and my name is Laverne Gray, and I'm here from Syracuse University. Life is determined in the body of knowledge. Thank you for that. And my question goes back to, I guess, early on in your presentation when you mentioned information being alongside, or maybe this is my notes, the African cosmologies and this idea of hospitality in that context. How do we prevent or block or be careful of the extractive violence that can occur when we try to integrate these different areas? Maybe not integrate is a bad word, but I'm American, so we talk about segregation and integration a lot. But just wondering on your response.
Yeah, Lauren, that to me, that's the question. And it's not a question that there's a simple answer to, but it's the question that for any of the work we do, it's based on I have a whole other talk on hospitality. Hospitality is reciprocity, but also hospitality breaks down into those understandings of guest and host in our Western understandings, and yet that's actually incorrect for the majority of cosmologies in the world, and also for the Greek cosmology of xenia, which means host-guest or guest-host or guest-friendship, that the host is the guest and the guest is the host. And so for us, it's about a constant circling of hospitality, and that our work is a response to an invitation. And then within that invitation, that will mean, if we accept an invitation, that means if we're working within a gift economy, we also, at some point, not necessarily the next day or the next hour, will be required to be the hosts ourselves. And that if we are not thinking in those circular ways, we will be doing violence to our hosts by only taking and by being extractivist, even if it's a genuine invitation, but also that we will do violence to ourselves because we will not be engaging in that hard work of hosting. So the host-guest elements are really important to us as concepts. But I also think that the fun is important too. And we are increasingly finding that we're working with methods of convening, which are very much about sitting around in a circle, eating together, having music together, telling stories together. Starting there, and then at some point the work kind of starts, rather than going in and going, I've got this consent form, will you sign it? I was recently doing and it's also partly an answer to your question, I was recently doing a training course on ethics at the university, and they have now allowed me in. But you can imagine that getting ethical approval for the stuff we do and saying we're not using ethics forms and it's not appropriate to do voice recording of consent, because it isn't. With people who are liable to deportation, we cannot and we will not do that. And I was chatting with Heather about the work of your colleague Eve Tuck and about her work on resisting and refusing to research. There are many times in our work where we just switch it all off, because we're into a place where human life is sacred and we will not violate it, and we might by doing what we do. Yeah, and we're in times like that at the moment as well. But I was walking across the university campus carrying this, and the vice principal stopped me, and he kind of looked at me and he did his usual eye roll, which he does when he sees me. And he was like, Alison, for goodness sake, what are you up to now? And I said, and what on earth is that? And I said, this is my consent form. And so that's one of the ways we work. And we've got a wonderful little song that the dance group produced, because we went in and we decided we knew them well enough to take the forms in and say, we want you to tell us honestly what you think about these. And they kind of ripped them up. And they said, why are you insulting us, asking us, after 8 years of being our friend, to sign these forms? This turns us into a completely, radically different relationship. We're not doing it. And I said, well, we have been asked to check with you. Are you still with us? Are you still walking this journey? And they said, we're going to show you how we're with you. And they then just impromptu started a call and response song and said, we're going to do this every time we dance. We're going to do that as a signal to the audience that we want you to film us, because we are proud of what we do. So I think those are some of the ways we work with. We've also recently, Hiab, my colleague, and myself, who I was speaking about, we've started doing Eritrean coffee ceremonies. And people gather around and they drink coffee and they start to ask us questions. And again, over coffee and popcorn, mbaba as it's called, bun and mbaba, then people start to talk and speak and think. And it's really about trying to convene a space that doesn't just look like our overly lawyered ways of working, which absolutely serve the powerful, but do not serve those who are our concern. So that's the start of our question, but I think it looks different for everyone, and I think the important part of an ethics process is that you ask that question.
Thank you.
Just add something. Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm just going to add the importance of courage in the work. Courage is something that allows the possibility of things that are not yet present but are possible. So the idea of having the courage to do things that maybe our institutions need to learn. So there's a lot that institutions and systems and processes need to learn. And so the courage to do that work is really important. I'm reminded of the quote from Maya Angelou where she says she considers courage to be the greatest virtue, because without it, you can't be with the other virtues. So thank you for the question.
We're going to take a couple more questions because we're already out of time. So please, and then Yitza.
Thank you so much. And you kind of addressed a little bit of this with the idea of courage, but I'm a scholarly communication researcher, and so scholarly communication has some genres that are embraced, such as the paper, such as now the data set. And I love just the feelings that a lot of this gave to me, and I think a lot of my colleagues. We're thirsty for new genres of scholarly communication. And so I'd love to hear some of the ways that you might encourage us to use new genres of communicating with each other and with others in our work and practice.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I think just to say a lot of people want to use artists as what can be called bid candy. So the things that you hang on to your bid to make it look like it's going to be like really pretty at the end, and bring artists in at the end to do that and to do the translation. You've done all the research and then they translate it. We radically refuse that way of working. And we say, we're going to come in with you, right? We're in with the bricks, we're in with the mess, And we want to work alongside you, and we want you, even though you'll be nervous about it and this wasn't what you chose, to find the poetry in your work, to find the drama in your work, to find the artistry in your work, and to celebrate it. And this is what Tawona's work is with our team, is to make you all poets and dancers and birds that fly and people that will wake up and tickle a lion. And that isn't about saying you have to be able to do that tomorrow. It's about making safe spaces where you can explore and find it for yourselves as a way of working and exploring, exactly as you were saying, those new genres that are available and open.
No, it's just important to say, within that, I think the continual separation of ideas is something that we somehow have to live with, but we all have to find a way of coming together. You know, as they say, one hand can't clap. You know, we need the collective. So I think being open, then looking inward, and really being not speaking of, but actually just living what we call transdisciplinarity. There's a whole range. Is that healthy exchange, and avoiding the either or is one of the things that's really interesting. Yeah. I should also just say quickly that October is a very strange month for me, because I am very, I've got my normal pace throughout the year, but October, I've got a raft of invitations where I'm invited to come and be African. Sometimes I'm actually asked, Tawona, can you wear a costume for this event? So it's getting away from that idea, but saying creative arts as a language of research. This is part of the work we're doing.
I'm going to ask one last one. You take a short one, if you can.
Well, let's see if it's short. Thank you both for this talk and poet. It's certainly going to stick with me, and it gave me lots of thoughts, and I look forward to reading, rereading, and hopefully also listening to this beautiful poem many, many times again, not poem. And my name is Jutta Heide. I'm from the Swedish School of Library and Information Science. And Alison, also your talk was really inspiring, and many of the things you said resonated with me, certainly, and I did take a lot of notes. But there's one thing that I think maybe many people in the room are wondering, but are afraid to ask. So I take it on me to do that. And that also connects to your point about the extractive logic and extractive violence in academia, and also epistemic violence, I would say. And the question is, aren't you executing or guilty of this kind of epistemic violence and that kind of extractive violence yourself by, advancing your career as a white European academic with the calabash and the method, white yourself, Isn't that smack of Orientalism and white savior kind of attitude again? I know you're expecting that question and you're prepared for it, not that I prepared you, but it's a question that is kind of in the room and that obviously you have a relation to. So I was just interested, I just wanted to say it, so it's done. And then someone
absolutely, and I've written whole books about this. I've written whole books about this and the issues and the questions that are there and there for all of us and are about changing the way. And I've got an answer I want to give to this in a moment, but I'm just going to let Tawona say something.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's an important question, and it comes up quite a lot because it's relevant and important. I think the thing that's really important from my experience as someone who is present in the UK, as someone from a former colony and someone who is in some way dealing with coloniality or decoloniality, there's something very important that for the work to be possible, we go back to courage. For the work to be possible, we go back to courage. Because it's very easy for Alison to say, I'm a white woman, I'm from the UK, a former colonizing power, therefore I'm going to stay away from this type of work. But then what that means is that the invitation and the possibility for those who are not in the position she is in, those who cannot access resources power and funding are then all unable to do what they do. So there's no comfortable place to stand, but it requires courage. Otherwise, very little would happen if everyone excused themselves or counted themselves out because of a biological category that they have inherited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Alison, and I am a recovering racist. I was born with this addiction because my ancestors were white and the country I am from grew fat in every imperial fight. Money, privilege, and power come down the barrel of a gun. That wasn't just in history, it's still how this is done. The work which calls me loudly towards your skins and eyes and tears is the work that is intention to assuage those birthright fears. So do not idolize my actions, do not praise my words as bold. Do not look at my intentions or the papers that I hold. The thoughts I have of charity are just part of this addiction, inherited from a line that is a long and bleached out fiction. I do not have to worry when my skin is in the room or on a train or in a car or in the immigration tomb. I'll be given time and money and more space because I'm white, because my ancestors were slave owners or slave drivers and right. But you, my friends, my kindred, will be skinned another way, flayed into diminishments through ever greater punishments and all those cruel admonishments. The only proper meaning of a white man's burden is that for all my days, commitment will be to a healing labor. On my deathbed, in my dying, I will be a racist too, but it's shouldering that burden that can lead to something new. Not denial of what sticks to every tone or shade or pore, but the making of relationships that brim with something more, something giving and forgiving of the shame upon my skin, something real and raw and honest that can live with history's sin. At times our conversations will make our skins revolve, and around us, through the laughter, a new world may evolve, when the tears are all that bind us and the skin gives way to bone, and through this work we love again and call one earth our home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. What a great way to kick off the ASIS annual meeting. It's amazing. Please join me again in thanking Professor Phipps and Mr. Sithole once more time. So this concludes the opening plenary, and please enjoy the conference. The rest of the sessions, we'll see you around, and we have our lunch town hall. We'll see you there as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll see you. Yep. Thank you. Good to see you. Yep.
All right, that last thing was worth saying.
Yeah.
Where are we having?